Last time we worked on putting We Wish You a Merry Christmas hands together, and this time we're diving in and talking about how you can make this piece your own personal version. So anytime we put a piece hands together, we learn the notes, we learn the rhythms, we learn the coordination, then there's always kind of the question, okay, and now what? And today I want to walk you through some ways that you can really take this song and make it your own personal version. We're going to talk about dynamics, we're going to talk about articulation and tempo, and maybe playing around with the notes a little bit. So let's dive right in. First, I want you to play around with dynamics. What can we do here? We can maybe start a bit louder. Back a little bit. And then maybe you can start immediately louder when the chorus comes back, or maybe you want to build up until the very end. So build in a crescendo from there until the end. That's one option. Maybe you want to play a more reflective version of We Wish You a Merry Christmas instead of a very hearty, enthusiastic version. So then maybe you'll start a little bit slower. We can also play around with tempo, and just in general keep kind of a more laid back dynamic. So not really forte, forte, maybe even mezzo piano, a quiet mezzo forte. And maybe you noticed both times I kind of eased the tempo at the very end to signal that it's coming to an end. Of course, it depends on the piece or the song and also your interpretation of a given work. Sometimes we really do want to go full energy until the very end. Sometimes we want to kind of ease back on the tempo a little bit as we're finishing. Very much open to discussion, very much up to personal taste. The next thing we can start to play around with is articulation. What is articulation? How we attack the notes and how we let go of them. So if you want to play kind of with a sharp attack, that would be a more energetic sound, maybe a little bit more staccato, maybe not so legato throughout. These are also things that you can play around with. So as we were thinking about dynamics, we played variation 1 a little bit louder, variation 2 a little bit more laid back. Now let's kind of flip that and do a more laid back version and see how that affects our articulation for variation 1, and then a more energetic version of variation 2. Here, if we want to have it more relaxed, more contemplative, then I would encourage you to do a little bit more legato and a little bit less bounciness, a little bit less staccato, more connections between your notes. Again, tempo is also going to play a really crucial role in how a version of a piece sounds. If we want it to have more energy, then we will typically take a little bit quicker tempo. Of course, there are exceptions to that. You can also play this in the tempo that I just played, a little bit livelier. Especially if you're still struggling with the notes a little bit and you want to have that energy, but you don't want to feel pressured to go really, really fast, then what can you do? You change the effects by playing louder, changing your articulation by, instead of having this kind of gentle attack on the keys, it's not even necessarily louder, it's just a little bit sharper sound that we're creating. And now to go back to a livelier interpretation, let's look at variation 2 and see what we can do with the articulation. We can change things up in both hands a little bit more staccato, not worrying so much about connecting the left hand. Of course, we have to connect it with the pedal anyway. Here's your excuse to not use pedal if you're looking for an excuse to not use pedal, and just leaving a little bit of space in the sound, a little bit airier, a little bit lighter. For example. And then if you want to take things to a whole other level, you can start to play around with the notes in and of themselves as well. I would encourage you to start out by doing this in the left hand, because there are a lot of things that we can do in the left hand to create different effects. For example, instead of playing just dotted half notes, maybe you want a livelier sound, and then you can go for sort of a, for lack of a better phrase, polka pattern. We can do, for example, so it's written G and D together, C and G, C sharp, A, and so on. What you can do is play the bottom note once and the top note twice. So then we have a pattern sort of like this. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then the question, of course, becomes, okay, great, but what do I do when it's not a dotted half note? Then you have to use your imagination a little bit. Either you can just play it as written when you get to that part. It's also what we call a cadence. It's a kind of a closing point of the phrase. And so it does make sense to do something a little bit different there, especially for the G and D at the very end, because that it just expresses some finality that we don't have if we make some sort of pattern out of it. So I'll show you how that would look if you're interested in that variation. I may be giving away my personal taste there a little bit. I do tend to prefer a more lyrical approach to the second line, to this verse that we have. Glad tidings we bring to you and your kin. Whatever the lyrics are. I'm a pianist. I think it's nice to have a bit of contrast. So it's fun to play something lively, but then also contrast is also nice. Similarly, if you like a more laid-back approach to the song, if you want something in general a little bit more lyrical, you can do something very similar, but instead of this polka pattern, you play the notes separately on beats 1 and 2, and then you hold on beat 3. So I'll show you that. And so on. Those are two kind of basic ways to approach changing the notes in the left hand. You can, of course, if you are a bit more familiar with chords and you want to play around with ideas a little bit more, you're welcome to, but I think this offers you a nice jumping off point that gives you some ideas that you can roll with. I hope that you have some new ideas that you can work with. I hope this has kind of given you some food for thought. Of course, this is just a very limited glimpse at the possibilities that we have when we're learning a song. The nice thing about Christmas songs and pop music and things that aren't seriously composed music is we get to have this sort of creativity. There's not a very concrete text that we're given from one of the master composers that we have to really abide by to the letter. Of course, we can also talk about ways that we can find our own interpretation and ways to kind of create our version of a piece, even when it's quote unquote very seriously composed music. But I think it's just nice to have this sense of freedom that we have with these pop songs, and to really think, okay, I have free license, open road, I can do whatever I want, and the possibilities are really endless. I've given you a small glimpse at the possibilities. I hope you take these and play around with them and use your creativity and find what feels right for you and really make this music your own. Until next time, happy practicing.